The hall of the Galactic Council had seen countless meetings over the millennia. Its walls, carved from living crystal, shimmered in shades of blue and gold, pulsing faintly with the energy of 1,000 distant suns. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy filled the vast chamber, their ceremonial robes heavy with the weight of tradition. Today, however, an unfamiliar tension coiled through the air. Today was different. Today, humanity had arrived. They entered without fanfare. No banners, no grand announcement. Only a simple procession of representatives, their faces calm, their strides steady. They wore no armor, bore no weapons, yet an undeniable presence walked with them, a sense of certainty that unsettled even the oldest of species. The counselors shifted in their seats, murmuring to each other behind jeweled sleeves and layered translators. The Serethi, whose species had witnessed the fall of empires, clicked their mandibles nervously. The Helvians, masters of diplomacy and manipulation, narrowed their multifaceted eyes in calculation. Even the Vern, ancient beyond memory, leaned forward with a rare flicker of unease. At the center of the hall, atop the days of judgment, High Arbiter Koreth raised a clawed hand for silence. Slowly, the whispers died away, though the tension only deepened. "Humans of Sol," Soreth began, his voice resonating through the chamber with the help of the crystalline acoustics. "You stand before the Council of Civilizations. It is here that matters of peace, of order, and of future destiny are decided. You have been summoned to account for your disruptions." There was a subtle weight behind that word. Disruptions. As though humanity's achievements, their rapid expansion, their unmatched technologies, their refusal to be bound by old treaties, were little more than inconvenient noise to be swept aside. The human delegation paused at the center of the hall. Ambassador Elaine Hart, chosen not for political favor, but for her unshakable clarity, stepped forward. She was not tall compared to some species, not fearsome in appearance, yet the way she carried herself made her seem larger than life. Her uniform was simple, a dark coat bearing only the emblem of Earth, a single blue-green sphere encircled by a ring of silver stars. "We have come," Hart said, her voice clear but steady, "to hear your concerns." A ripple of disbelief passed through the assembly. No bowing, no apologizing, no pretense of guilt, just a direct acknowledgement and an invitation to speak plainly. Soreth's eyes narrowed. Around him, murmurs grew louder again. Humanity's arrival had not been what they expected. They had predicted defiance, perhaps arrogance. They had not predicted calm. Across the chamber, an observer from the Cell Confederacy scribbled hurried notes. Beside him, a Zarthi warlord whispered to a diplomat from the Varn. "They are not here to ask permission." And indeed, they were not. In that moment, it became clear to those wise enough to see it. Humanity's presence was not a challenge. It was a declaration, a quiet, unstoppable statement of being. The council had gathered to judge humanity, but it was the council itself that now felt judge. And the galaxy, watching through 1,000 hidden eyes and listening devices, held its breath. The council chamber was silent now, every eye fixed on Ambassador Hart. For the first time, in a long while, the oldest members of the council, those who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, felt a flicker of doubt in the air. As the weight of her calmness settled over them, it was as if the very fabric of space had changed. Humanity, so young and unrefined in the eyes of the galaxy's ancient races, was now something that could not be ignored. The stories were no longer myths. The legend of humankind had come alive. The elder from the Serethi homeworld, known for his wisdom and centuries of cautious diplomacy, leaned forward. His many eyes glinted with both curiosity and apprehension as he spoke. "The humans, their rise was unexpected," he muttered, as though speaking to himself, though his words carried far beyond his own thoughts. A species so new, so unpolished, yet they forged their own place among the stars faster than any of us predicted. The murmurs began again, spreading like wildfire through the council. The word legend hung heavy in the air. It had started as stories among the older races, tales that were often dismissed or laughed off as exaggerated. Yet now, in the quiet of the hall, the reality of those stories could not be denied. Humanity had risen from a single planet in the Sol system, a fragile blue world nestled among countless others in a seemingly insignificant corner of the galaxy. From that humble origin, they had done what no one had thought possible. They had not been shackled by tradition, nor by the rules that had kept other species in line for millennia. Theirs was a race of doers, of dreamers, and of survivors. In just a few hundred years, they had ventured beyond their solar system, creating technology that defied the expectations of even the most advanced minds. Where others hesitated, humanity leaped. Where others deferred to ancient agreements, humanity built new ones. Where civilizations teetered on the brink of stagnation, humanity innovated and transformed. Their rapid growth had shaken the balance of the galaxy, whether the galaxy wanted it or not. But it wasn't just their technology that had people worried. No, it was something deeper, something more fundamental. Humanity had a fire in them, an unyielding spirit that couldn't be put out by old empires, ancient customs, or even the silent threats of superior technology. The galaxy's older races had long relied on their power, their knowledge, their sense of superiority. And for a time, those qualities had held sway. But humanity was different. They did not rely on ancient wisdom. They created their own. They did not fear failure. They used it as fuel. The Helvian ambassador, ever calculating, watched the humans carefully, weighing every word in his mind. He had long dismissed them as unpredictable, too emotional to be trusted. Yet here they were, standing before him with calm eyes and clear purpose. It was a message he hadn't anticipated, one he couldn't quite place. And perhaps that was the problem. Humanity had not only outpaced them technologically, they had outgrown the expectations of the old galaxy itself. The Council had always seen itself as the stewards of the universe, deciding who could flourish and who would wither. But humanity had come to show them a truth they had been too proud to see. Their time of dominance was over. And that truth, unsettling as it was, spread like wildfire through the hearts and minds of every species in that room. The galaxy was changing. Humanity was no longer just a disruptive force. They were a force of nature, something the galaxy could no longer pretend to ignore. The High Arbiter's voice boomed again, breaking the stillness that had gripped the room. Humanity has made its presence known. And we are not ungrateful, he began, his voice dripping with the thin veneer of diplomacy. However, your methods are reckless. The balance of this galaxy is delicate. We have kept peace for millennia. And your race, though impressive, is an anomaly we cannot allow to run wild. Ambassador Hart stood unfazed, her expression unchanging, even as the Council's gaze turned colder, more calculating. The air in the chamber grew thick with tension, as if every word spoken now carried the weight of history. The Council knew what was coming, the offer they had prepared for this very moment. The Varn representative, a towering creature with metallic plates woven into his skin, stepped forward. His voice was low, measured, but unmistakably firm. Humanity has shown extraordinary potential. Your technological advances far surpass our own in many respects. You could become great allies, if you choose to cooperate. He paused, giving the words time to settle, then continued, his tone turning more formal. We extend an offer of partnership, but it will come with conditions. You must submit to oversight. Your expansion must be curbed, your progress restrained. We will place a restriction on your military capabilities, and we demand control over your most sensitive technologies. A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. The offer was one of control, of limitations disguised as cooperation. It was an olive branch wrapped in chains, a velvet cloak covering the iron of their authority. Humanity was being asked to comply, to surrender the very spirit that had made them what they were. The Serathi elder spoke next, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. The peace we have maintained is fragile. Your unpredictable nature, your willingness to challenge old norms, threatens it. We do not ask this lightly, but we must insist that you adhere to the established order, for the sake of the galaxy's future. There it was, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. The galaxy's future was defined by the old ways. The established order was one that had favored the strong and ancient, a status quo that humanity had appended in a matter of decades. The Council did not fear humanity's strength. They feared the loss of control, the disruption of their carefully constructed peace. Ambassador Hart's eyes remained steady. "You ask for submission," she said simply, her voice carrying a quiet authority. "You offer partnership, but it is a partnership based on domination. We came here as equals, not as children to be watched, nor as tools to be wielded." There was a tense silence. The delegates exchanged glances, but none spoke. They had offered their terms, and they had expected compliance. But the humanity before them was not the compliant race they had assumed. It was a force that could not be easily shaped, easily bent. "The galaxy is changing," Hart continued, her voice unwavering. "We are not here to ask for permission. We are here to stand as neighbors, and if you cannot accept that, then we will find our place elsewhere. But we will not be chained." The High Arbiter's gaze shifted, flickering for just a moment. For the first time, the weight of his own words seemed to press upon him. He had expected defiance, but not this. Not the calm, resolute refusal that hummed in every syllable Hart spoke. It was clear that humanity would not bend. The offer had been made. The terms had been set. But it was not the acceptance the Council had hoped for. And now the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the old order would bend, or if humanity would walk away. The silence in the Council hall stretched, palpable and heavy, as all eyes turned to Ambassador Hart. She had spoken her truth, and now the weight of her words hung in the air like a challenge, impossible to ignore. The Council had expected defiance, perhaps even anger. Instead, they had been met with calm, unyielding resolve, and it shook them to their core. High Arbiter Soreth's claws twitched, betraying a moment of hesitation. He was not used to being questioned, much less refused. In all his years of dealing with the countless species that had come to the Council, none had ever responded with such quiet finality. For a long moment, he said nothing. The other counselors, their voices lost in the wind of their own thoughts, remained silent as well. The words they had prepared, the offers of control, of peace at a price, seemed inadequate in the face of this human ambassador's certainty. And then, without warning, Soreth spoke again. His voice was lower this time, edged with the first true hint of tension. "Humanity's refusal to compromise is noted," he said, his tone softer, yet still carrying the full weight of authority. "But be warned, Ambassador. The galaxy has a way of adjusting to those who refuse to fall in line. We have seen races burn out, their bright stars snuffed by the inevitable pressures of time and space. Your species, no matter how impressive, is still fragile." There was a moment of stillness, and for a fleeting instant, it seemed as though Hart might flinch. But instead, she stood taller, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on the Arbiter. When she spoke again, it was not with the voice of an advocate seeking approval, but with the quiet authority of someone who had already made her decision. "We are not fragile," she said, her words clear and firm, "and we are not afraid of change." A shiver ran through the room, a collective exhale that seemed to ripple through the chamber's crystal walls. Humanity had not come to the table seeking the Council's favor. They had not come to negotiate their place in the galaxy. They had come to declare that they would walk their own path, no matter how treacherous or uncertain that path might be. "The galaxy has changed because of us," Hart continued, her voice steady. "And if you cannot see that, then perhaps it is you who are fragile." The room fell into another stunned silence. The delegation from the Cell Confederacy exchanged a quick glance, the weight of the words clearly affecting them. The Varn representative seemed to stiffen, clearly unnerved by the challenge. Even the Sirathi, who had always prided themselves on their cautious wisdom, exchanged quiet murmurs. This was no longer a simple matter of human expansion. This was something more. This was a species that had arrived not to fit into the galaxy, but to reshape it in their image. The time of old alliances, of silent submission to the rules of the past, is over, Hart said, her eyes locking with each delegate in turn. We will not be bent by your terms. We will not be controlled. You asked us to fall in line, but humanity has never fallen in line, and we will not start now. And with that, the silence deepened, the tension building like a storm on the horizon. The Council had offered their ultimatum, and humanity, in its quiet, defiant strength, had responded with a voice that reverberated through the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. The council chamber buzzed with the faint hum of the crystal walls, a sound that had once been comforting to those who had called this place home. But now it felt hollow. The tension in the room was thick, like a storm that refused to break. For a moment, everything seemed to pause, as though the very galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see how humanity would respond. Ambassador Hart turned slowly, signaling to her delegation. Without waiting for any further deliberation or permission, she began to walk toward the exit. Her pace was measured, unhurried, as though she had already made up her mind, as though nothing in this room could sway her. Behind her, the human delegation followed suit. There were no grand speeches, no final declarations. They were simply walking away. For the first time in millennia, the Council watched as a species simply left. Not defeated, not cowed, but walking away. And in that quiet exit, 1,000 thoughts raced through the minds of the council members. Were they witnessing the end of an era? Was this the moment when humanity, the upstart race, turned its back on the galaxy's old order forever? The delegates from the Cell Confederacy were the first to speak, their voices a low murmur. They cannot just leave, one of them whispered, but the words fell flat. The Varn representative remained silent, though his brow furrowed with uncertainty. He had thought humanity would break under pressure, but instead they had simply walked away. Zoreth, the High Arbiter, remained seated, his claws resting on the crystal table. His mind raced, caught between the remnants of his pride and the undeniable truth in front of him. He had expected humanity to argue, to plea, to beg for peace on their terms. Instead, they had done something far more dangerous. They had taken their power and simply left, refusing to acknowledge the Council's authority. As the humans exited the chamber, the room's atmosphere shifted. The delegates who had once seen themselves as the galaxy's stewards now felt something akin to dread settle over them. There had been no warning, no formal announcement, no grand departure, just the slow, deliberate walk of a species leaving, not out of defeat, but out of choice. The galaxy had watched, and now it would see what humanity would do next. And it wasn't just the Council that was watching. Across 1,000 worlds, from the farthest reaches of space to the cities of the most advanced empires, humanity's departure reverberated like a shockwave. Would humanity crumble without the Council's protection? Would their boldness falter in the face of the challenges ahead? Or would they rise again, stronger than before? But the humans were not asking those questions. As their ships slipped quietly out of the Council's space, they were already focused on the future. They had known from the beginning that they would never be given a seat at the table. But that didn't matter. They would build their own table. And as they left, the galaxy held its breath, uncertain of what would come next. The old order was no longer the rule. And humanity was walking away from it all. Humanity's departure from the Council was not the end, but the beginning. As their ships crossed the threshold of the Council's space, the message had already been sent. They would not be contained. They would not be shaped by ancient decrees or held to the standards of a galaxy that had long since grown stagnant in its complacency. In the days that followed, as humanity's ships retreated back to the edges of known space, the galaxy buzzed with rumors, debates, and questions. Some believed humanity's actions were a death sentence. A species so young, so unrefined, could not survive on its own without the protection of the Council. Others saw it as a declaration of war, a challenge that could not be ignored. But there was a third group, a group that watched quietly from the shadows. Those who recognized the spark that humanity had ignited. Across the galaxy, species that had long been kept in check by the Council began to stir. The Sarlith, a nomadic race known for their warrior code, exchanged whispered messages across their fleet. The Asterians, a collective of once subjugated species, held clandestine meetings in the deep recesses of their hollowed moons. Even the Varn, who had once thought themselves beyond question, began to question the authority they had so long held. Humanity's defiance was not a call to arms. It was a call to something deeper, to freedom, to independence, to a galaxy that did not bend to the will of the ancient powers. The spark of rebellion that humanity had set ablaze was one that no one could easily extinguish. Among the people of Earth, the reaction was swift. News of the Council's rejection spread like wildfire. Social media erupted in debate, with every corner of the planet chiming in. Some rallied behind the ambassador's words, proud of humanity's boldness. Others worried about the unknown challenges ahead. But one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer willing to play by anyone's rules but their own. In the streets of cities, in the halls of governments, the message was clear. If the galaxy would not accept them as equals, then humanity would carve out its own place, beyond the reach of old empires and forgotten treaties. Earth's leaders, once divided on how to approach the Council, now stood united in their resolve. The time for waiting was over. Humanity would go forward on its own terms. Yet it wasn't just the humans who noticed. Deep within the Council's inner chambers, delegates convened in a rare emergency session. Soreth, the High Arbiter, paced restlessly. He had never expected this. Not this boldness, not this refusal to yield. They think they can simply walk away, Soreth said to the gathered counselors, his voice a low growl. They underestimate the power of unity, the strength of our collective will. They will learn that we are not easily ignored. But deep within him, a seed of doubt was growing, because in truth, humanity had done something that no one else had dared. They had taken their future into their own hands. And for the first time in centuries, the Council could no longer be certain of the galaxy's direction. The spark had been lit. It was only a matter of time before it would spread. The galaxy's reaction to humanity's bold departure was swift and far-reaching. As the humans retreated to the outer rim, they found their own path forward. But they were not alone. The ripple of their defiance spread, shaking the foundations of old power structures that had long been entrenched in the galaxy's fabric. Empires and alliances once thought unshakable began to crack under the weight of this new uncertainty. On a distant planet, the Sarlith warlords held a summit of their own. They had always followed their ancient code, living by the sword and adhering to a code of honor older than most galactic civilizations. The humans, to their surprise, had demonstrated the courage and independence they had long admired. The Sarlith had seen the Council as the true masters of the galaxy, but now, the idea of submitting to an order that would suppress the will of the strong seemed increasingly untenable. "We have spent centuries kneeling before these so-called elders," one of the Sarlith generals growled, his voice low and gravelly. "And now, these humans have shown us that we need not bow before anyone. If they can walk away, so can we." Across the stars, whispers began to echo. The Council's grip on power was slipping, slowly but surely. Species that had once feared reprisal for questioning the established order now saw the humans' defiance as a beacon of possibility. It was as though the galaxy had been living in a shadow, and for the first time in eons, there was a sliver of light breaking through. On the fringe worlds, human settlements flourished. Their colonies, once small and isolated, now began to grow in both population and influence. The humans, unbound by the Council's restrictions, had thrown themselves into the expansion of their frontier. New technologies were developed. Their military forces began to organize on a scale that hadn't been seen since their first spacefaring days. There was no longer any hesitation in their steps. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Would humanity truly become a force to be reckoned with, or would they burn out like the countless other upstarts who had risen and fallen throughout galactic history? But the humans weren't concerned with the galaxy's opinion. They were moving forward, creating their own future. Meanwhile, within the Council's citadel, debates raged on. Sorath's frustration was palpable. For all the power he wielded, he could not bring himself to ignore the growing realization. Humanity was no longer a mere anomaly. They were an emerging force, one that could not be stopped with treaties or threats. Their strength lies not in their weapons, nor in their technology, one of the Council's more cautious members said, his voice tinged with concern. It lies in their unity, in their unyielding belief that they can shape their own destiny. Sorath's gaze hardened. They will learn, he muttered, that no one can escape the gravity of the old order. But even as he spoke, the Council's unity began to splinter. Old alliances that had been solid for millennia were now being tested. The seed of rebellion had taken root, and in the quiet corners of the galaxy, many were already preparing for the inevitable storm that was coming. The galaxy was no longer a place where the Council's word was law. And no matter how hard the Council tried to resist, the winds of change were already blowing, stronger than ever before. The galaxy was holding its breath. Across the stars, in the quiet moments between the stars' eternal hum, the question was on everyone's mind. Would humanity truly be able to create its own future, free from the Council's grip? Or would their audacity crumble under the weight of the universe's overwhelming forces? In the coming months, the answer began to take shape. Humanity, having severed its ties with the Council, had not only survived, but thrived. The human colonies at the outer edges of known space blossomed into bustling hubs of innovation, resource extraction, and new scientific breakthroughs. It was not the untested dream of the Council that had been proven wrong, but the myth that the galaxy could never bend to the will of a single species. Humanity had refused to play by anyone else's rules, and in doing so, had carved out a space for itself, a space of its own making. The human fleet expanded rapidly. Where they had once relied on borrowed technology, they now produced their own advancements. Their ships were sleek, powerful, and designed for speed and efficiency, outpacing even the Council's most prestigious fleets. Their weapons, once crude, had evolved into masterpieces of precision and strength, far beyond what anyone could have predicted. But it wasn't just technology that set humanity apart. It was their unshakable drive. They were a species of pioneers, of builders, of those who refused to stay still. Each new colony was a testament to their resilience. Each new alliance, a sign of their determination to succeed on their own terms. Meanwhile, the Council, once the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, was faltering. The unity they had so carefully maintained was cracking. Species that had once bowed to the Council's authority now began to question their old alliances. Empires once content to sit in the shadow of the Council's power began to stir, seeing the humans rise as a sign that the old ways were no longer the only path to success. The galaxy was becoming more chaotic, more uncertain. The status quo was slowly disintegrating, and the Council had no way to stop it. Back on Earth, leaders debated what the future would hold. Many feared the unknown. Could humanity sustain its newfound power? Would they eventually fall prey to the same pitfalls that had brought down other civilizations? But one thing was undeniable. The human spirit had proven itself indomitable. Then, as the human fleets moved further into uncharted space, a message was sent across the stars. It was simple, yet powerful. We are not your enemies. The message read, we are your neighbors. We walk away, not because we fear you, but because we choose a different path. You will not control us, but we do not wish for war. The galaxy is vast. There is room for all of us. It was an offer, not of submission, but of coexistence. Humanity had walked away from the Council, not in defeat, but in triumph. And now, the galaxy had to decide. Would it accept humanity's challenge, or would it push them further into the unknown? The galaxy held its breath, unsure of what would come next. But one thing was certain: humanity had made its mark, and there was no going back.